Hello and welcome to the big story, and you're watching CVR News Network, and this is CVR English, and I'm Sandeep. Global markets experienced a significant turmoil on April 7th following the announcement of aggressive US tariffs by President Donald Trump. The tariffs introduced on April 2nd under the monkier Liberation Day have had a profound impact on both developed and emerging markets worldwide, and India's stock markets have affected very greatly, not in the recent times like this. And this is the big story of the day. Wall Street's bloodbath spilled over into a second day on Friday as the Dow Jones Industrial Average plummeted by more than 2,200 points after China unveiled stiff retaliatory taxes to President Trump's tariffs. The broad market index fell 3.5%, the Dow Jones Industrial Average slipped around 3.1%, while the tech-heavy Nasdaq Composite declined 3.7%. The Dow tanked 2,231 points a day after suffering 1,679 point drop, its previous worst session since the start of COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. The two-day sell-off wiped out $6.4 trillion in the market value. S&P 500 index fell by 274 points, which is 4.88% equivalent, marking the second largest daily point loss in the history. Nasdaq Composite declined by over 1,050 points, which is 5.97%, the largest point loss in its history. And Dow Jones Industrial Average decreased by 1,679.39 points, which is 3.98%, the fifth largest loss in the history. And the latest, US stocks began Monday in the red, with S&P 500 following the Nasdaq Composite to enter the bear market territory. However, the person responsible for the stock market tanking, US President Donald Trump, has compared tariffs imposed on countries across the globe by him as medicine, adding that he is not intentionally creating a market sell-off.
Stupid. I mean, I think it's I don't want anything to go down, but sometimes you have to take medicine to fix something.
The Chinese Foreign Ministry said that the market has spoken when asked about the tariffs. What do you make of that?
The market has spoken when they look at the fact that we have $1 billion trade deficit. When you look at the trade deficit that we have with certain countries, way over $1 billion per country. But with China, it's $1 trillion. And we have to solve our trade deficit with China. We have $1 trillion trade deficit with China. Hundreds of billions of dollars a year we lose with China, and unless we solve that problem, I'm not going to make a deal. Now, I'm willing to deal with China, but they have to solve their surplus. We have a tremendous deficit problem with China. They have a surplus of at least $1 trillion a year. I think it's like $1.1 trillion, and I want that solved. And so China is, they say the market's spoken. The market, China is right now taking a big hit because everyone knows we're right.
Were there any deals made?
I spoke to a lot of leaders, European, Asian, from all over the world. They're dying to make a deal. But I said, we're not going to have deficits with your country. We're not going to do that because to me a deficit is a loss. We're going to have surpluses, or we're at worst going to be breaking even. We've been treated so badly by other countries because we had stupid leadership that allowed this to happen.
Europe, is that a place you'd like to also get to?
Well, the problem is that Europe has made a fortune with us. Europe also has had a tremendous surplus with the United States. Europe has treated us, it's a little smaller, but they've treated us very badly. China has, but Europe has also. Europe has been very bad to us. Europe has taken our leaders for a ride. They don't take our cars. They don't take our food products. They don't take anything. I think there's not going to be, I don't think inflation's going to be a big deal because if you look at me.
European stocks dropped sharply on Monday, deepening a global market rout that kicked off last week following the latest announcements of US President Donald Trump's tariff regime. The pan-European stocks 600 was 3.8% lower with all sectors and major bourses suffering significant losses. Germany's DAX index was 3.75% lower, pulling back from a 10% loss earlier in the session, while France CAC 40 tumbled 4%. World leaders have expressed a strong reactions to US President Donald Trump's announcement of the reciprocal tariffs on multiple countries. Several top officials have criticized the move, calling it a harmful step towards the trade destabilization. While some nations plan retaliatory measures, others seek dialogue to mitigate economic damage. The global community urges US to reconsider the policy, emphasizing the importance of international cooperation and trade fairness.
This is Liberation Day.
Is a major blow.
We will impose a 25% tariff.
Nobody wins in a trade war.
From the United States, that's tough.
My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day. Waiting for a long time. Effective at midnight, we will impose a 25% tariff on all foreign-made automobiles. You bring it up, Howard. This is our great Secretary of Commerce. So, if you look at that, China, first row, China, 67%. That's tariffs charged to the USA, including currency manipulation and trade barriers.
President Trump's announcement of universal tariffs on the whole world, including the European Union, is a major blow to the world economy. I deeply regret this choice. Let's be clear-eyed about the immense consequences. The global economy will massively suffer. Uncertainty will spiral and trigger the rise of further protectionism.
Nobody wins in a trade war. That is not in our national interest. We have a fair and balanced trade relationship with the US. Negotiations on an economic prosperity deal, one that strengthens our existing trading relationship. They continue, and we will fight for the best deal for Britain.
I consider the U.S. President's latest tariff decisions to be fundamentally wrong. This is an attack on a trade order that has created prosperity all over the world. A trade order that is essentially the result of American endeavors. The entire global economy will suffer from these ill-considered decisions. Companies and consumers all over the world, including in the USA. The decision announced last night was both brutal and unfounded. Unfounded because you don't correct trade imbalances by putting tariffs in place. The basics of economic theory show the opposite. Particle Arley as the imbalance doesn't take into account services, including digital services, to cite just one, if not others.
Strengthen and expand domestic manufacturing for the internal vehicle market, reinforcing innovation, research and development, and energy efficiency. We have the plan. We have spoken with the automotive industry. The objective is for most of the vehicles consumed in Mexico to be manufactured in our country, in dialogue with the different countries of the world.
What's going on with the tariffs, and we got, as you know, the auto tariffs this week from the United States, that's tough. That's tough. But this is an enormous opportunity for this company, for this country, and I think ultimately for America.
Our country has been the largest global investor in the United States since 2019. Japanese companies have played and continue to play.
This is Liberation Day.
Is a major blow.
We will impose a 25% tariff.
Nobody wins in a trade war.
From the United States, that's tough.
My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day. Wait.
Stock markets around the world tanked on Monday as investors were gripped with fear about potential economic devastation from President Trump's sweeping tariffs. In Asia, stock markets closed deep in the red as investors digested the prospect of a bruising trade war between the world's top two economies. China announced plans for a fulsome retaliation against Trump's tariffs after markets had closed on Friday. Hong Kong's benchmark Hang Seng Index slumped 13.2% on the day, its biggest one-day drop since 1997, the year Britain returned the former colony to China. Taiwan's Composite Index shed nearly 10% in its biggest one-day drop on the record. In the mainland China, key indexes closed down as much as 9%. Japan's Nikkei Index fell close to 8%. China accuses the United States of serving its own selfish interests with its massive tariffs programs announced by President Donald Trump, adding, "This is typical unilateralism." Protecting the economic bullying, China on Friday said it would impose a retaliatory levies of 34% on all U.S. goods from April 10th.
美国以对等为名，行霸权之实，牺牲各国的正当利益，服务一己之私，将美国优先凌驾于国际规则之上，是典型的单边主义、保护主义和经济。美国以对等为名，行霸权之实，牺牲各国的正当利益，服务一己之私，将美国优先凌驾于国际规则之上，是典型的单边主义、保护主义和经济。美国以对等为名，行霸权之实，牺牲各国的正当利益，服务一己之私，将美国优先凌驾于国际规则之上，是典型的单边主义、保护主义和经济。美国以对等为名，行霸权之实，牺牲各国的正当利益，服务一己之私，将美国优先凌驾于国际规则之上，是典型的单边主义、保护主义和经济。美国以对等为名。
When we go to Middle East, over there also the similar effects are seen. Middle East stock markets stumbled due to new US tariffs and plummeting oil prices. Brent crude fell nearly 15% over 5 days to just over $63 per barrel, approximately 30% below the previous year's levels. Regional markets such as Dubai, Abu Dhabi and Saudi Arabia's Tadawul index experienced significant declines. And even Pakistan trading was suspended at the Pakistan Stock Exchange PSX for an hour as a benchmark KSE 100 index plummeted by more than 8,000 points on Monday. Financial analysts blamed the fear of a global recession for a massive fall in the stock exchange. Even after a cooling period for 1 hour, the PSX lost another 2,000 points when trading resumed, resulting in a record of 8,600 points drop in intraday trade. The index closed at 1,14,909.48, down by 3,882.18 or 3.27% from the last close. And on this turmoil midst, Benjamin Netanyahu set to meet US President Donald Trump at the White House on 7th. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu before that met US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick in Washington. Netanyahu said on Sunday he hopes Trump will ease tariffs imposed on Israel when the two meet in Washington this week. Under a sweeping new tariff policy announced by Trump, Israeli goods face a 17% US tariff. And back home in India, Indian benchmark indices Sensex and Nifty opened with significant losses on Monday following a global market rout fueled by intensifying trade tensions and growing recession concerns in the US. As a result, the total market capitalization of all BSE listed companies dropped by 19.4 lakh crore, falling to 383.95 lakh crore. All the major sectors entered in negative territory, with Nifty Metal sinking 8%, Nifty IT sliding over 7%, Nifty Auto, Realty and Oil and Gas each fell by more than 5%. In the broader market, the small cap index dropped 10%, while the mid cap index declined 7.3%. Markets crashed on Monday with the Sensex plummeting 2,226.79 points, which is equivalent to 2.95% to close at 73,137.90, and Nifty tumbling 742.85 points, which is equivalent to 3.24% to end at 22,161.60 as escalating trade tensions between the US and China triggered a global sell-off. The market opened with a significant gap down, with the Sensex starting at 71,444.94 compared to its previous close of 75,364.69, and the Nifty beginning at 21,758.40 versus its prior close of 22,904.45. The indices touched today's lows of 71,425.01 and 21,743 respectively before recovering slightly by close. Sectorial indices painted at a sea of red, with Nifty Metal 6.75% down, Realty, Auto, Financials and IT all registering a sharp losses between 3 to 4%. Broader markets faced the worst, with Nifty Midcap 100 falling 4.76% to 48,235.80. The currency market also felt the impact, with rupee weakening by 0.50 against dollar. Rupee traded weak below 85.80 as global capital markets witnessed a sharp plunge following escalation in US-China tariff tensions. President Trump's newly imposed tariffs range from 10% to 50% of the global imports, significantly raising the average tariff rate from approximately 2% to 23%. Goldman Sachs has raised the probability of US recession within the next year to 45%, citing tightened financial conditions, heightened policy uncertainty and potential foreign consumer boycotts. Amidst these, there was a question raised to Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, and he replied strongly rejected the US new tariffs on key Japanese exports, asserting that Japan has done nothing unfair. He emphasized that Japan's commitment to fair trade and global economic stability. Kishida also unveiled plans for tax cuts aimed at stimulating Japan's economy, despite concerns about fiscal impact. He called for dialogue with trading partners, including the US, to resolve trade tensions and maintain mutual prosperity.
Waiting for a long time. So, if you look,
内閣総理大臣。
引き続き我が国に対する関税というものが。
So, if you look at that, and then what about NAFTA?
アメリカに参りまして、いろいろな不公正なことはやっていない。
The USA, including currency manipulation and about NAFTA. They were wrong about China inflation and the.
石破内閣総理大臣。
引き続き我が国に対する関税というものが、これが引き下げられるということ、そういうことは強く言っていかねばなりませんが、一朝一夕にそれができるとは限りませんので、国内対策というものには万全を期していかねばなりません。
ありますから、非常時の体制にぜひ切り替えていただきたい。
我が日本国は不 公正なことはやっていない。フェアでないことはやっていないということをきちんと言わなければならないと思っております。担当閣僚、アメリカに参りまして、いろいろ
Waiting for a long time. So, if you
石
look,
破内閣総理大臣。
引き続き我が国に対する関税というものが、
so if you look at that, and then about NAFTA.
アメリカに参りまして、いろいろな不公正なことはやっていない。
The USA, including currency manipulation and about NAFTA. They were wrong about China inflation and the
石破内閣総理大臣。
引き続き我が国に対する関税というものが、これが引き下げられるということ、そういうことは強く言っていかねばなりませんが、一朝一夕にそれができるとは限りませんので、国内対策というものには万全を期していかねばなりません。
ありますから、非常時の体制にぜひ切り替えていただきたい。
我が日本国は、不公正なことはやっていない。フェアでないことはやっていないということをきちんと言わなければならないと思っております。担当閣僚、アメリカに参りまして、いろいろ
waiting for a long time. So, if you
石
look,
破内閣総理大臣。
引き続き我が国に対する関税というものが、
so if you look at that, and then about NAFTA.
アメリカに参りまして、いろいろな不公正なことはやっていない。
The USA, including currency manipulation and about NAFTA. They were
And that's the big story of the day. We shall meet you with yet another episode of Big Story. Keep watching CVR.
I don't want anything to go down, but sometimes you have to take medicine to fix something.
We say no! Genocide, we say no! Ethnic cleansing, we say no! Ethnic cleansing, we say no! Ethnic cleansing, we say no! Victory to Palestine! Palestine! Donald Trump has got to go! Woo! Victory to Palestine! Donald Trump has got to go! Deportation, we say no! Donald Trump has got to go! Deportation, we say no! Donald Trump has got to go! Palestine, we say no! Donald Trump has got to go! Genocide, we say no! Donald Trump has got to go!
European, Asian, from all over the world. They're dying to make a deal. But I said, we're not going to have deficits with your country. We're not going to do that because to me a deficit is we're going to have surpluses or we're at worst going to be breaking even. I don't want anything to go down.
This is Dr. Shantan Palwai, consultant orthopedic surgeon.
I'm Dr. Rohit Kiran Fadnis. I am a consultant general surgeon at Image Hospitals.
In this camp, we would like to advise you about your various problems concerning your ligament injuries, joint replacement surgeries, and various other polytrauma or deformities corrections.
At Image Hospitals, we do get cases of the various type of hernias. For the recent advances, we have